So, Dallas Goedert versus Zach Ertz. The Eagles are $50 million projected to be. The Eagles are projected to be $50.676,939 over the cap for the 2021 football season. Thus creates an interesting and somewhat disappointing as Eagle fans conversation around the tight end position. Zach Ertz or Dallas Goedert? All right, y'all. Let's do our best to get into this. What's up, Eagles Nation? What's going on, NFL world? How you doing, division rivals? This is Stephen Hyder with Gate City Sports Channel, the sports channel where the cerebral NFL fan comes for about 10 minutes of daily content. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever it is you get around to watching this, guys. Once again, my name is Stephen Hyder, and this is Gate City Sports Channel. All right, y'all, today's topic. Look, I'm just going to put it out there. Guys, I know that this is a little bit of a kind of a weird conversation to have. This is not a certainty type thing. It's not like you have to choose between Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. Actually, the decision is a little more interesting to that. I get that. But just work with me, guys. It's the middle of June. What else are we going to talk about other than these hypothetical situations? So today's topic, guys, I'm going to talk about if the Eagles, and that's a big if the Eagles are forced to choose next season between Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz, what might factor into the decision? What could I provide for you guys to make you guys say, hey, you know, these are some pretty good points here to why we might lean one way or the other? That's what we're talking about today, guys, is we're going to break down the advanced analytics on these guys. I'm going to run a little bit of film. I'm not going to do an in-depth film study for you guys today, but I'm going to run a little bit of film for y'all just to kind of show you some of the weaknesses in both of their games. These aren't damning things by either player, but nonetheless, these are things that we got away because they do happen with both of these players. And we're just going to talk in general, guys. We're going to talk about offensive formation, the rest of the roster, and how it could impact this decision. All those things kind of come into play today, guys. So listen, without further ado, guys, I think it's time to just roll the film here and just dive into the conversation. Rip the Band-Aid off, if you will. All right, y'all. Film study. Let's get it. Okay, ladies and gents, so today's film session, what I want to walk you through is a play that happened in Atlanta, because I think it illustrates the weaknesses of Zach Ertz pretty well, okay? And mind you, this isn't some systemic issue with Zach Ertz, it's just, it does show up at times, and this is a really good example of when it reared its ugly head on a game-winning, what could have been a game-winning drive, by the way. So what I want to show you guys is just, number one, the formation the Philadelphia Eagles are coming out in. They're coming out in 11-man personnel. If you look, you got Trips to your right, and you got Zach Ertz over to your left. So Zach Ertz is playing, essentially, that field side of the offense. And you can tell that the Eagles are trying to get into a 3-by-1 set to isolate Zach Ertz one-on-one. I also want you to take a look for a second, and I want you to watch who Zach Ertz is actually being isolated on, because this is an important part of the conversation when we're judging Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. He's lined up on a corner. That's the number 26 for the Atlanta Falcons. So Zach Ertz is one-on-one with Isaiah Oliver. What I want you to watch here is, as we roll the film a little bit, is look at the one-on-one nature here. Look at that cushion Isaiah Oliver is giving to Zach Ertz. When I look at advanced analytics, these are the things that I'm looking at, and then I go back to try to confirm what I'm seeing on film, and it tells me a lot about players. Like, number one, teams respect the crap out of Zach Ertz. I can tell that by the average cushion he's given. Judging by the cushion, I know exactly what kind of, coverage, and I know who is covering you. I can tell right away by that cushion. So if I see something that's almost 6 yards in cushion, I know he's being covered by either a nickelback, a safety, or a corner. It's quite obvious. You can tell by the cushion. Anything that's under about 5.5 yards, between 5.4 and 5.6, I'd say is kind of a, because we're talking about an aggregate and an average. So that's a mix of coverages, but generally speaking, you're facing a lot of linebackers at that point. anything under 5.5 yards. So if you go under 5.4, like anything, it's like 4.5 to like 5.4 yards, 5.3 yards. It's quite obvious you're facing a lot of linebackers. Watch this play roll out. You'll see the weakness really quickly. So as Zach Ertz gets into his break, you know, the timing's just slightly off here. They got exactly what they wanted, which was one-on-one coverage, but they have to throw short of the sticks, and that's an issue. So when they throw short of the sticks, now Zach Ertz needs to make sure that he turns to the correct side of the defense to be able to squirm out of that tackle and go get the first down. In my opinion, he turned the wrong way. He doesn't break that tackle, and it illustrates beautifully where he struggles. In my opinion, Zach Ertz, and I'm not saying this is a systemic issue, guys, but I'm saying he does have the tendency to struggle at times when it comes to yak, yard after the catch. Now, if you hit him on the go where he's running, he's incredibly athletic and he can make plays. But trying to break through tackles, I don't always think that is his strongest, suited, position here is to be a yak guy. I don't believe that about him, and I think the film supports my viewpoint about Zach Ertz in this regard. All right, ladies and gents, now that we've talked about Zach Ertz a little bit, I'm going to flip, and I want to talk about Dallas Goedert. There was one weakness to Dallas Goedert's game I noticed too, guys. None of these, I'm not calling these systemic issues. These were issues that were somewhat, coming across and being highlighted because of the inadequacies and the inefficiencies of our offense last year. But I'll say this about Dallas Goedert, guys. He did have a tendency to, with that physicality he plays with, to sometimes put that football on the turf. And that's a problem. All right, y'all. Let's roll some film and I'll show you guys, all right? Okay, ladies and gents. So this play right here, this is late in the fourth quarter in that Seattle and Philadelphia game. The Eagles were trailing 17-3, and we were starting to move the football. We were getting ourselves in a pretty good position here. I want to point out a few things that are going to stand out. Number one, this formation looks almost identical to the formation I showed you where Zach Ertz was the focus, right? However, obviously you can tell since we're talking about Dallas Goedert, we're probably talking 12-man, and we are. This is the unique thing about Zach Ertz, guys, is that when people say things like, oh, the Eagles don't have possession receivers, some people fail to understand just the way that Zach Ertz is utilized in the Eagles' offense. Zach Ertz kind of plays almost as an X-receiver or a big slot at times. He kind of does fill in that kind of role. But we're not talking Zach Ertz. We're talking Dallas Goedert. So I want you to look here as you have a 3-by-1 set again, right? Your 3-by set is going towards your field side, and then Zach Ertz is over there on that boundary side, singled up. I want you to look again. Who is Zach Ertz singled up on, guys? A corner again. Let's take a look at Dallas Goedert. Technically, in this coverage scheme, a linebacker should pick up Dallas Goedert, but as I roll the film here and you see how this plays out, you'll see that that's not exactly what happens. What happens is that they bring a blitz, and you actually have an advantage here of 3-on-2 for the Eagles. Dallas Goedert gets more than this first down, and I just wish he'd have gone out of bounds or just went down instead of continuously fighting for really no purpose, no served here. He wasn't going to break that. What ends up happening, and I'll continue to run the film here, guys, so you can see the conclusion, is he keeps struggling and fighting for those yards, and then he goes down. But before he goes down, the ball comes out, and we can see that. So, I'll reverse this play, and I'll take it back to the line of scrimmage and talk to you for just a second longer about something. Dallas Goedert is lined up on a linebacker. Zach Ertz is lined up on a corner. I want to talk about some of the advanced analytics and what they tell us about these two football players. And I want to talk about how this affects, how this ties into the Eagles' decision if we're faced with such a decision of whether or not we want to keep Dallas Goedert or Zach Ertz, and there's this weird possibility we may have to get rid of one or the other, which I don't think is 100%. But, in honesty, it could happen. So I want to talk about the things that could influence such a decision. I want to talk about what the advanced analytics tell us about these two football players, all right? So let me turn the cameras around, and let's have a conversation, guys. Let's talk about it. All right, ladies and gents. I want to take a look at the deep analytics, and I want to talk about what this tells us, right? So I'm looking at things like generic things like receptions and targets and the catch percentage. But then I want to look into, yards, touchdowns, all that stuff. The really generic, maybe kind of surface level analysis stuff. But then I want to go deeper. I want to look at things like cushion, the average cushion a corner or a defender gives a receiver, the separation that the said receiver gains, the targeted air yards, so where the balls are being completed to said receiver. And I want to frame this into a bigger conversation about these two players. So to begin with, let's take a look at Zach Ertz, guys. Zach Ertz had a 5.9 yard cushion, 2.7 yards separation rate, and he was targeted at 8.7 yards down the field. Now let's flip this around and let's take a look at Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert had a 5.6 yard cushion, 3 yard separation, and 5.8 yards targeted air yardage, okay? It's pretty easy just by looking at this to see from the targeted air yards that Dallas Goedert was playing a little more underneath than Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz is going more of an intermediate route level. Dallas Goedert's kind of feeding on the underneath stuff. And that kind of plays out if you look at things like, let's look at receptions and targets. Dallas Goedert was targeted 86 times, had 58 receptions. That gives him a 67.44%, catch rate. Not bad. Pretty good. He had 607 yards on the season, 5 touchdowns. Good stat line for Dallas Goedert. We all love Dallas Goedert for a reason. We look at Zach Ertz. He was targeted 135 times and had 88 receptions. A 65% completion rate, or catch rate, I'm sorry, not completion rate, but catch rate, for 916 yards, almost 1,000 yards receiving, and 6 touchdowns. If you pay close enough to the analytics here, guys, something will start to stick out. And it'll show you that we're looking at 2 different types of tight ends. Zach Ertz is more along the lines of the tight ends such as I'm sorry, I hate to say it, guys. I'm not saying physical, but where they're being targeted down the field and the type of routes they run. He's more similar to a Gronkowski, okay? A Jimmy Graham, all right? Looking at guys such as Travis Kelce. Those are the comps I would give him. But in return, when you look at a guy like Dallas Goedert, when you really pay attention to the deep analytics, you see guys more like Kyle Rudolph, George Kittle, then Dallas Goedert, right? Those are the kind of guys that I think that he fits into, right? And by the way, as I was doing this, I saw some other things about tight ends that I want to say for another day, but there's some really underrated tight ends in the league right now that should be getting way more praise than just Kittle, Kelce, and Ertz. I mean, there's a really good group of young tight ends coming up in the league. I did notice this. These are different types of tight ends here, guys. When you look at the deeper analytics, you can see it. You can see where they're being targeted. You can see where the separation comes. Because look, the shorter the cushion you have, sometimes the greater the separation you'll get because you're getting an opportunity to run by your guy. But if a guy is really playing off of you, unless you're, and the way you look at it is where's the targeted air yards? Because obviously if your guy's playing off of you and your targeted air yards are very short, that means you're clearly going to have a good amount of separation there. You have to look at those things to kind of sum it out to see what's going on here. And where I think the larger conversation lies here is not the player-for-player value here. It's what do the Eagles want to do? Because if you look at a guy like Travis Kelce, let's compare his numbers. 5.4 yards per target. Okay, I'm sorry, cushion. 5.4 yards cushion from defenders. 3.1 yards of separation. 9.3 yards targeted air yards. So he's being targeted down the field, clearly. 97 receptions on 136 attempts, right there with, Ertz. I got to give him credit, man, because he's got an exceptional catch rate for a guy targeted this much. 71%, catch rate. Very, very good. 1,229 yards, 5 touchdowns. We know Travis Kelce's a very good football player. But I also noticed something about Kelce, that 5.4 yard cushion. He's benefiting because he's getting some linebackers on coverage on him. Why is that happening? Because Tyreek Hill, Mecole Hardman, right? The receiver play in Kansas City keeps it to where you can't really use a safety on him. You can't really use a corner on him. Because we can spread them out, because they can spread teams, not us, but because Kansas City can spread teams out, it allows Kelce to eat big time. I think it's what the Eagles want to do. I think the Eagles want to add all this speed. So that way, we get the same advantage with Ertz and allow Ertz to become this crazy statistical guy again, which he's been for the past few years, guys. I'm not arguing that, but to really become a nightmare to match up with. But in return, when you look at a guy like Dallas Goedert is really similar to George Kittle in the numbers department. Not Kittle's, he's an absolute star, guys. I'm not saying that these are, you know, two sides of the same coin here. I'm saying that the style of play is similar. George Kittle, 5.2 yards cushion, right? He's facing a lot of linebackers. 3.31 yards of separation, or 3.3 yards of separation, getting a lot of separation off of that. 5.7 yards being targeted. He's right there with Dallas Goedert in that targeted air yard area. 85 receptions on 107 targets. 79% completion rate, right? Because he's feeding underneath, guys. 1,053 yards, 5 touchdowns. There's some similarities between these two. So the question really becomes, what do the Eagles want to do? Do we want to run an offense similar to Minnesota and San Francisco? Because I think Dallas Goedert there's not even a question. He's the right guy. Or are we looking to get a little bit more like Kansas City and spread teams out and then really create that mismatch with that tight end? That's where I think the real question lies between these two football players, if that's the decision we're forced into. There's one more key component to this that has nothing to do with analytics. It just has to do with common sense football here, guys. The larger question about keeping two tight ends has to do with how good our receivers are. The receivers will probably really make the necessity of this move happen. Because if our receivers if we just cannot identify receivers and we keep struggling in that department, then we're going to keep both players. I just think that's inevitable. I don't think that can be avoided. So it's really going to come down to the receiver plays. All right, guys, I've taken up a lot of time. I'm sorry, guys. So I'm going to flip this back on you. These are my thoughts, but you already know I'm going to ask you. I want to know, what do you think? All right, guys, leave your thoughts below. Let me know what you think about Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. Guys, I'm going to do a more expanded version of this tight end thing later on, because there are some hidden gems in the league that I think need to be pointed out because people just aren't talking about them. All right, y'all. Peace. You know how we end these videos. We do E-A-G-L-E-S. All right, y'all. Let's go, Eagles.